This is an article out of USA Today, and this report came out on April 19th, 2004. NORAD had drills eerily like September 11th, Pentagon Trade Center among imagined targets. Now remember, President Bush has said dozens of times that no one had ever heard of a plan to fly planes in the buildings. No one had ever imagined it. I've got at least 50 media reports going back to 95 about it, where governments were talking about their concerns of this and bringing forward documents. But every time they'd research it, it led back to the CIA and terrorist-funded organizations being used by this government to create the pretext for war and invasions of sovereign countries. And so now suddenly, in USA Today, NORAD had drills eerily like September 11th. 5.5 months before 9/11, Pentagon officials wanted to have a drill of hijacked jets flying into the World Trade Center in Pentagon. But senior White House officials told Pentagon officials that it was too unrealistic, that they didn't want to have the drills. Now, why is the media focusing in on these drills? Because we've been talking about it for years. And what they focus in on is a drill that never happened 5.5 months before 9/11. 2 years ago, 2+ years ago, I got a call from a listener who said he worked at the Pentagon, and he's on air, and he said, Alex, have you seen the Pentagon website? We had a drill 2 years before 9/11 of hijacked jets flying into the Pentagon and World Trade Center. Not 5.5 months before, not a canceled drill. They had a drill. And here is the original screenshot of the Pentagon website. After we posted a link to the Pentagon website, 24 hours later, they took this down. I wonder why they would do it. They say here, contingency planning, Pentagon mass cal exercise simulates scenarios and preparing for emergencies. And it shows an image of the Pentagon on fire, hit by a hijacked jet. And we link to it because somebody in the Pentagon tells us about it. It's public. And suddenly it's taken down. You're asking, how do we have a copy of it? Well, this is from prisonplanet.com. We were smart enough to save it, as we do all articles, as soon as we found it. Then I had Stanley Hilton, Bob Dole's former chief of staff, on my radio show twice. He's suing Bush not for prior knowledge, but for running 9/11. He has 400 plus of the victims' families on his ticket suing Bush. You never hear about Stanley Hilton, do you? And he said, about 1.5 years ago on my broadcast, he said, I've talked to military officials, people at NORAD. There was a drill on 9/11 at 8:30 in the morning. And they've told me that that was used as the stand-down order of, oh, these hijacked jets, it's just a drill. See how convenient that is. So USA Today doesn't talk about the drill they held 2.5 years ago. Well, 2 years before 9/11, now over 4 years ago. They don't talk about the drill they had on the morning of September 11th run by the CIA, which was actually the smokescreen for the stand-down of NORAD. They don't talk about that. What they talk about is a drill 5.5 months before 9/11, which was canceled. And again, here it is, right out of USA Today. NORAD had drills eerily like September 11th, Pentagon Trade Center among imagined targets. And it says, oh, the Pentagon and the White House thought that it was too unrealistic. Here's an ABC News spin piece where they try to explain all of this away just a few nights ago. And then on top of it, at the end of it, they say, oh, hey, now we're going to find out why there were no fighters stationed around there to protect the buildings. There were fighters all over the place at least 8 bases loaded with missiles. They were ordered to stand down because it was, quote, just a drill. Go ahead and go to Peter Jennings, engaging in damage control. Here it is.
We're going to take a closer look tonight at another example of where, despite the conventional wisdom, there were people in the United States who actually were preparing to defend against the kind of attacks which occurred here on 9/11. The North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD for short, has been defending the skies over the U.S. and Canada for almost 50 years, 46 to be precise. USA Today reports that in the 2 years before the attacks on September the 11th, NORAD conducted exercises using hijacked airliners as weapons. And one target was the World Trade Center. Here's ABC's Brian Ross.
President Bush has said again and again that no one could have imagined what Osama bin Laden ordered for September 11th.
We knew he hated us. But there was nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government, that could envision flying airplanes into buildings on such a massive scale.
But that turns out not to be true. U.S. military planners did envision and practice those very scenarios. As reported by USA Today, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, conducted exercises with fighter jets, simulating hijacked planes flown into the World Trade Center in the 2 years before the attacks.
There are a lot of good people throughout the bureaucracy that were worried, were thinking about it, were trying to think outside the box.
Pentagon planners also envisioned the attack on the Pentagon 5 months before it happened. According to this April 2001 Pentagon email, Air Force officials wanted a war game, having a terrorist group hijack a commercial airline and fly it into the Pentagon. The email was obtained by the nonprofit group Project for Government Oversight.
The people who gave it to us were clearly concerned for some period of time that this kind of event could happen. And they were pushing very strongly on trying to exercise this event.
The idea was to check response times to launch fighter jets. But according to the Pentagon email, the plan was ultimately rejected by senior Pentagon officials as too unrealistic.
It certainly does not reflect as well on the policymakers that may have been saying that there was no conceived way that anybody could be thinking of this.
Still to come are questions, big questions, about NORAD's response on the day of the attack. Why, despite all the exercises and the planning, Peter, jet fighters were not in place anywhere near New York or Washington.
It's quite an amazing story. Many thanks.
Jet fighters were not in place anywhere near New York or Washington.
It's quite an amazing story. Many thanks.
We knew he hated us. But there was nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government, that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
This is all very upsetting to me. I get very angry about this. The lies. I could analyze that little 3-minute newscast for days. Why there weren't fighters in place? I have stacks of mainstream news articles, the Pentagon's own reports. 20 minutes in a car from New York, there's one of the biggest U.S. military bases in the world that has responsibility for fighter intercept of hijacked jets, you name it. Hundreds of fighter aircraft. They were ordered to stand down because of a drill on the morning of 9/11 by the CIA. And we have those articles from the Associated Press posted on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. Now understand, there was a drill on November 3rd, 2000 by the Pentagon of flying planes in the World Trade Center and Pentagon. This is from the Pentagon website from 2000. We posted it on the website 2 years ago when we found it because of a Pentagon tip, and then it was taken down. But we screen saved it 2 years ago, 2 years before 9/11, now 4+ years. Then you have the drill on the morning of 9/11. But the news isn't talking about that. By the way, the drill on 9/11 was reported by the Associated Press. I just told you earlier that we broke that story with our government sources before the Associated Press. After we reported that there was a CIA drill that ordered NORAD to stand down, damage control again went into gear, 2 AP articles within weeks saying, yeah, there was a CIA drill. The CIA's now announced that morning at 8:30 in the morning of exactly what happened on 9/11 happening, but it's all just a big coincidence. Then the second AP article said, not that it was hijackers in the first drill, which they first said, but, oh, just planes off course. But the actual program did say it was hijackers. So this is all damage control. They're coming out now saying NORAD had drills eerily like September 11th. This is all being done to condition you. So when you hear us talk about planes flying into buildings, when you hear us talking about drills of doing that, and drills on 9/11, and drills 2 years before 9/11, when you hear that, you'll think, oh, yeah, I already heard about that on the news. It was just a coincidence. No, forget the drill that never happened. There are at least 2 other drills we know happened. One on the morning of 9/11.